welcome back to the fifth session of our fifth Streaming Media Connect virtual event. I'm Eric Schumacher-Rasmussen, the editor of Streaming Media and conference chair for Streaming Media Connect. I know we're all eager to get back to in-person conferences, but these Streaming Media Connect events have given us a chance to keep some conversations going in a way that we couldn't have otherwise. So thanks again for joining us. If you're wondering about in-person events, and I know we kind of all are, systems are all go right now for Streaming Media West in Huntington Beach in the first week of November. The program is live on the link that our producer, Steve Nathans-Kelly, just pasted in the chat, and you can check out what we'll be talking about. And within the next week or two, you'll be able to find out who's going to be talking about it as we add speakers to the website. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our diamond sponsor for Streaming Media Connect. Limelight Networks is sponsoring the entire 3 days of sessions, and we appreciate the help from them in helping us bring this to you. And of course, I'd like to thank the sponsor for this panel, Brightcove. And in just a few moments, Brightcove's Lexie Knauer will be joining us as we talk about the connected TV ad opportunity. Also, for you attendees out there, you're all eligible to win a $50 Amazon gift card. We'll draw the winning name at the end of the session today, and you do need to be present to win. So stick around for that. We'll announce your name before we sign off, and then you can look for an email to find out more information. So, as I said, we're going to be talking about connected TV advertising. By some estimates, connected TV advertising grew by more than 40% in the last year, and more brands are shifting their spends to OTT, or at least adding more OTT spend in addition to linear. And while technological challenges still remain, the targeting afforded by connected TV advertising offers marketers unparalleled opportunities to reach audiences with advertising that is more relevant and therefore more effective than ever before. We've got a terrific panel assembled here, and I'm going to kick things off by asking them to introduce themselves one by one. And I'd like to start with Derek Gatts. Derek, join us, please. Hello.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me. And hi, everybody. Name's Derek Gatts. I come to you from WarnerMedia, where I oversee ad product strategy and development across the news and entertainment verticals for properties like CNN, TNT, TBS, as well as some of our newest and most exciting platforms like HBO Max with ads. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Glad to have you. Next up is Jake Piasecki. Jake.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me as well. My name is Jake Piasecki. I'm the co-head of sales for Roku.
All right, thanks for joining. And could you talk a little bit about Roku's role in this connected TV advertising world real quickly?
Yeah, for sure. You know, the way we look at it, we're now the America's #1 streaming platform, and really taking a partner agnostic approach and really trying to supply and provide the platform for which any and all apps can reach that right audience and really to scale up what we're doing in general in the streaming world.
All right, thanks, Jake. Next up is Stanley Wong from Distro TV. Stanley, talk about who you are and where Distro TV fits into this ecosystem.
Hello. My name is Stanley Wong. I'm one of the co-founders of DistroScale. We have Distro TV as one of our business to consumer service. Just kind of a very quick of what we are is the DistroScale is a technology platform for creating video and powering video across many different platforms and so forth. And Distro TV is one of our main services. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. And Lexie Knauer, the aforementioned representative from our sponsor, Brightcove. Hi, Lexie.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So talk about how Brightcove fits into this world of connected TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Lexie, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Brightcove. Brightcove is an online video platform. We help medias manage, distribute, and monetize their content. And we do so through a multitude of solutions, one of those being server-side ad insertion. For the purposes of today's conversation, I'll be representing the vendor perspective as it relates to CTV. Yeah.
Excellent. So we've got a number of perspectives from inside the industry, from content providers and platforms. And then, of course, we have the vendor perspective, as we said, and then we also have the analyst perspective. And John Giegengak from Hub Entertainment Research is going to join us. John, introduce yourself, and then you have some slides reflecting some of the research that you've recently done that can help us set the stage for the rest of the conversation. So take it away.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for having me. Good to see everybody. My name's John Giegengak, and I am the founder and one of the principal analysts at a company called Hub Entertainment Research. And we're a research company. We do about 50,000 consumer surveys a year. And our goal is to be the experts and provide our clients with expertise on everything about how today's TV consumers find, choose, and consume video content. And so I'm going to share some output here from a few recent studies that we've done on connected TVs and on ad-supported advertising platforms in particular. This is a topic that we've been paying a lot of attention to, and that we think is going to be really, really important over the next few years. And you know, the goal that we wanted to look at is in the streaming video world, where a lot of people would have you think that folks have become disabused of watching ads on TV, now that they have ad-free options. You know, what really is the role of ad-supported TV in this ecosystem? And just to set the stage, the environment into which some of these free with ads platforms have been launched, it's never been a time when people have been using more sources of TV than they are right now. So sources of TV were already going up. This shows the sources per viewer in a study that we do that tracks that going back to 2018. Those were already growing pretty rapidly, but then COVID really put that into overdrive. And in 2021, the average person uses 5.7 different sources of television: online, offline, traditional, pay TV, even antennas. One of the biggest things that's happening, though, is that people are stacking multiple providers in tandem. So in 2021, 62% of people said they used 2 or more of the 5 biggest SVODs. So that's Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, HBO Max, and Disney Plus. And that's up from only 36% of people who were using that many back in 2018. And when you consider that any one of those has enough content on it to fill up an average person's viewing time, you get a sense of the kind of the congestion, the competition that's going on, and also the amount of money that people are paying to stream these platforms. And this shows itself in one of the catch-22s of this golden age of television. People are really excited about all of the options and all of the content that they have to choose from, but managing all those platforms, making sure that they're getting the best use out of them all is becoming a challenge. And this is just one example of many that we have that's happening. This shows the importance of universal search, the ability to search across all your providers for particular shows. And the green bars are the number of people who say that's either somewhat important or very important. And you can see that when we get up to 4 paid subscriptions or more, 97% of people say that that's at least somewhat important. More than half of people say that it's very important. So they're really actively looking for something that will help them manage this this battery of platforms that they're using every day. And enter smart TVs. So smart TVs are an area where we're really seeing a huge uptick in usage, and the implications are going to kind of echo through how people choose platforms, and especially ad-supported platforms in the future. So this is from some research that we just did about 6 weeks ago. Among the people who say they watch on a smart TV, 40% of those people said they bought at least one smart TV during the pandemic itself. And another question where we ask, what's the first thing that you turn on when you want to watch TV? This just shows people who said they default to using on a TV screen. So it's roughly the same amount, 2020 to 2021 in total, who default to watching on a TV set. But you can see the number of people who say that they default to watching on an app built into a smart TV has almost doubled just in 1 year. So as people acquire those smart TVs, they're becoming more attuned to using the apps that are built in. And they're also becoming a lot more influenced by the operating system within the TV, and even free with ads channels offered by the operating system, like the Roku channel, in terms of how they're spending their time and what they're watching. And when we look at how people choose these different platforms, a lot of conventional wisdom would tell us that the first thing they look at is which of these platforms are ad-free. And in reality, that's really not the case. When we ask people what were the main reasons you signed up for a provider that you added in the past 6 months, ad-free was up there, but there were other things that were more important. And the two things that matter a lot more and cumulatively than whether a platform is ad-free is content. So the most important thing is access to some show that I couldn't get from another platform. And the number 3 most mentioned was access to a deep catalog of content, lots and lots of shows so that I won't run out. And then the second most important is good value for the cost. So you can see that providers that offer a lot of content, especially exclusive content, have a leg up here, and platforms that have good value or are even free have more advantages still. And when we ask people, which of these comes closer to how you feel about when it comes to choosing how to watch TV? Are you on the side of I'd rather save money? Watching ads will let me pay $4 to $5 less than watching ad free. I'll choose that option. Or would you say I'd rather avoid ads, even if it's going to cost $4 or $5 more per month? There are significantly more people who say I'd rather save money. And that includes some of the people who say that they dislike ads the most. Even those people will watch ad-supported TV if it's cheaper or if it gives them access to content they can't find elsewhere. And that means that even in the streaming world, ad-supported TV is still a central part of the TV ecosystem. So 95% of the people in our sample say they use at least one ad-supported platform. Only about 80% say they use at least one ad-free platform. And from June 2020 to June 2021, the free ad-supported channels, Pluto TV, the Roku channel, platforms like that rose 25% in just 1 year. And we're already seeing that trajectory continue since June. So this is a really important topic, and I was really excited to be asked to participate in this panel. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Terrific. Those are great insights, John. And I think, we've all seen the numbers about how the usage of ad-supported platforms has risen over the last 18 months. And I think, the pandemic with people at home, people are discovering things that had been there for a few years already, but they perhaps weren't aware of, right? We were all aware of our Netflix and our Amazon Prime Video subscriptions, but then there was this LG app on our phone, on our TV, or the Samsung channels, and suddenly people realized that there's some great content there. And so let's talk a little bit about that. And Lexie, let's start with you. In this ecosystem, for a decade or more, when people thought OTT, they thought SVOD, they thought Netflix, they thought Amazon Prime Video. But ad-supported platforms have really come into their own in the last, as I said, 12 months, 18 months. What role do you see ad-supported platforms playing in the larger OTT landscape right now?
Yeah, happy to kick it off. I'm one of the few people who actually loves advertising. I think it serves a very important role for consumers, content owners, and brands. For consumers, it's free content, right? It gives you access and democratizes education and entertainment. So if you're one of those people who either doesn't have the means or prefers not to pay, it gives you an alternate value. It's also a viewing format that we're used to, right? We've been consuming content this way since of television. For content owners, if you have exclusive premium content that you can do a subscription service, this offers an additional revenue stream if you want to do a multi-tiered approach. If you are offering free ad-supported content, as John's research suggests, this gives you a way to have skin in the game with the major streaming services, right? You can get a little bit more market share by having a lower barrier to entry. And then finally, for brands, it gives them access to this migrating audience in a controlled, measurable environment. So long-winded answer, but it's a win-win-win for all three players in the ecosystem.
Absolutely. Do other folks have thoughts on the role ad-supported platforms are playing in the larger ecosystem?
Yeah, I'll jump in too, Eric. And John, I loved your research. It aligns so well with what we're seeing at Roku as well. And a big piece of what we see across the 160 million or so consumers that we're servicing on the Roku platform is value, is choice, and the number one searched item on Roku devices is free, right? And so to Lexie's point, that democratization of content and that ability for folks also that are also looking to cut the cord, and that's something we haven't really touched on yet. I'm sure we will, but cord cutting is a massive thing that accelerated during COVID as well. We don't see it slowing down. We see it continuing. And a big piece of that is to seek out better value, all while either getting, to John's point earlier, some of those, exclusive shows that you can't get anywhere else that you'll only find on Netflix or Hulu. But then also that really large stable of really comfortable lean back comfort viewing, right? That allows that sort of still channel surfing opportunity that people scrolling through their set-top box on their cable boxes that will just, tune in and tune out of shows in and out. That's now available on an AVOD platform, on a lot of AVOD platforms now too, which I think is incredibly valuable as more and more consumers make the shift out of linear cable television into streaming television.
That lean back experience, I think, is one of the more overlooked benefits of some of the ad-supported channels. We talk to a lot of consumers who feel overwhelmed by the task of having to choose each show that they're going to watch next. It's kind of an ironic thing to feel overwhelmed by. It's a first world problem, to be sure, but it's something that people oftentimes want to just take their hands off the wheel and have something chosen for them. And this is something that we see in other types of content, like streaming music on Spotify, where they added channels that don't play every song in the world, but they play a very specific sort of genre, and you have some idea of what you're going to see and a better idea of what you're not going to see, but you don't have to fight through the decision paralysis of actually choosing what the next title it's going to be. That's chosen for you. And there's a really good analog to that type of a entertainment session in live streaming TV or sort of browsing sessions like Jake talked about a second ago.
Yeah, from my perspective, we actually see a lot of explosion of content out there from a lot of independent voices that are now getting their content out in front of consumers in a very, very big way. All the way from a lot of underserved audiences, for example, such as like international audiences or multicultural audiences that are getting content from their home countries, as an example. And so there is definitely a place for SVOD type content, but for most consumers, there's a certain amount of budget that they're able to pay for the premium content, and then beyond that, the long tail of content, because of the democratization of platforms and access through multiple devices and so forth and so on, gives a lot of outlets for these new voices to be heard there, especially the independent voices, the global voices, and other things giving access to those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing that I would add that's exciting to me about advertising within a CTV environment from a platform perspective is everything feels so much more purposeful. If you're on a mobile device or a desktop device, so much of the consumption that the consumers are looking for is about filling time. And when I think about the ways that we use a CTV device in my household, it's so much more about gathering the family. It's about popping some popcorn. It's about preparing to sit down and consume content. And for an advertiser to have the opportunity to message a consumer within that mindset is so much more powerful than any other platform that we've had to date.
Excellent. You've all touched upon my next question, but Stanley, from your perspective, what are some other advantages that ad-supported platforms offer that consumers appreciate?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is ad-supported platforms offer lots of advantages. Again, it really kind of boils down to access into content that they otherwise would not have been able to see. Let me give you a use case, for example. So let's say the ethnic minority type of audiences in the United States, as an example. My parents came from China many years ago. And I remember the days of when for them to access the content from their home countries, it was very, very difficult. One method is to be able to just kind of, for these families, is to access it through satellite dishes, expensive satellite dishes up at the top of their homes. The other way is to, pay for expensive premium packages on their cable devices, or trading VHS tapes or DVDs back and forth between one another. So that becomes very, very difficult to see a lot of that content, the entertainment, the news content, and so forth and so on. With the advent of CTV, especially advertising supported CTV, it makes that that available to everyone and makes it easy for them to access. In addition, if you look at the challenge for media companies from a global perspective, let's say from home countries like India or China or other places, those companies have a hard time reaching those audiences here in the United States, for example. And they have to deal with a lot of piracy of their content that's out there. And advertising supported CTV gives them an opportunity to be able to touch and reach those audiences in a way that's much more relevant and much more targeted than they have ever before.
Anyone else want to follow up on that?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
go ahead, Lexie. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I love that you touched on the ability to access content you otherwise wouldn't, whether it's an XPass service or niche content, like we have LGBTQ content with Reverie. Kind of a unique use case that we've seen at Brightcove was Southwest, massive tentpole conference that people love to attend. They flock to Austin every year. Not everywhere to go to South by Southwest. Those tickets are really expensive. You have to hop on a plane. Your company might not support your travel there. One of the best they saw virtual and using this in an OTT environment and hosting their film festival was they were able to reach global audiences. They were able to reach less economically viable audiences. So that was really special and kind of plays into what Stanley was describing.
I was also going to just chime in as well about the breadth and depth of choice, right? And that it also, not only internationally, but, and Stanley touched on this also, but content and filmmakers in the States that are maybe underrepresented in national television. We know how difficult it is to greenlight a show that's going to end up on, you know, a broadcast network and the dollars that go into the production. In the AVOD streaming world, there's a lot more opportunity to take chances and to really lend more of a voice to filmmakers and content producers that otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity. That's something that we've really championed at Roku, certainly inside of our Roku Originals tent poles, as well as different other, you know, film festival sort of things that we're looking at in the future, that we would provide more, you know, multicultural voices to start producing content that helps them gain greater access into film production, television production, that type of world.
Another thing that something that we've been talking about a lot at WarnerMedia recently is some research that our teams here just wrapped up that's all about intentionalism. And from a consumer perspective, one of the biggest values that CTV brings is this idea of like, it's not just about grabbing attention, but the ways that consumers are choosing to spend their attention has changed dramatically throughout the pandemic and with all of the socio-political activities that have gone on over the last 24 months. You know, we found that an overwhelming majority of people are looking to entertainment as their form of content consumption during these times. But from an advertising perspective, 65% of consumers found brands more favorable if they actually offered them fewer commercials, right? And this is one of the biggest advantages of getting away from a time-bound system that linear television works within, but it's a fundamental shift in how advertising succeeds with consumers, right? Like we've moved away from a world by which advertisers have to win and grab and steal attention and into a world where advertisers should be adding and collaborating and empowering consumers within the environments that they're consuming this content. And so much of that is unlocked because you're not on a time clock as you would be with linear TV.
That leads really nicely into my next question. And let's start with Jake, but talk about how the ad experience in connected TV is different from traditional linear broadcast, both from a consumer standpoint and from a brand standpoint.
Yeah, sure. It's really, really critical. And that's something that I think we in general in the OTT connected TV space have the opportunity to right a lot of different, you know, I don't want to call them wrongs, but maybe they are wrongs that we saw in you know, maybe some of the old linear days or some of the very early digital.com days. The over commercialization, the annoying pop-up ads, that type of thing. We have an incredible opportunity to really right this space and make this space a really tangible and good opportunity for both consumers and for brands and advertisers. And a big piece of that Derek just touched on, I think, is the most critical element in advertising, and certainly in what we all do in putting ads in front of the right consumers, is attention. And a big piece of that, right, that I think we have the opportunity in the CTV space is making sure that the ad experience is relevant to that audience. Right, wrong, or indifferent, broadcast TV is a mass reach vehicle. They don't have the opportunity to necessarily, although that's changing. Well, we can talk about that in DAI later. But the opportunity to put the right ad in front of the right consumer at the right time is really, really critical. And more brands and marketers are recognizing the value of that CTV ad experience. This past upfront, I think it was a very robust upfront across the board. But certainly in CTV, and certainly I know firsthand at Roku, we saw an incredible upfront with really, really strong ad demand. And so obviously that signals more and more marketers really like what's going on in OTT, and Roku certainly saw a good chunk of that. Consumers don't hate ads, as a few of you guys just mentioned, right? They just hate bad ad experiences. And so if it's, and it's all about making that experience more relevant to that advertiser, and that's a big piece of data, which we can talk about, which is really, really critical, and something that a lot of us in the OTT CTV space have the ability to use. But then also it's about how do you create fewer ad breaks or shorter ad breaks? One of the things we're doing on the Roku channel is, we run 8 minutes of ads per hour, which is, roughly half that of a linear or cable network. And so this all helps increase that engagement level. And I think that's the critical piece, that you can go back to an advertiser and go back to a consumer group, and they know that ad experience was something that was more relevant to them, got them back to their content quicker, and hopefully added to the experience and not took away.
Lexie, from the vendor perspective. Oh, go ahead, Jake.
I had one more thing to say. I'm sorry, and this is really important in this world too, and I think we're going to talk about this down the road, but is frequency control, right? And that's one of the areas that I think we all are very concerned about in this space, and making sure, again, that viewing ad experience is also not repetitive ads in the same ad over and over again. And we've heard some of this early days of CTV, and that's something obviously is critically important too. I'll shut up now.
No, I was just going to echo exactly what you said around ad loads. I think as a consumer, I mean, you notice it, and as a vendor, responsible for the server-side ad insertion and stitching, we always recommend to do minimal ad loads in these environments. It's just a different level of time. We also encourage our content owners to be a bit more creative in how they work with their partnerships, because be natural synergies with certain brands and certain content. You're going to work with each other a lot. So sometimes that means you don't, rather than inundating the viewer with ads, maybe you rotate out the creative, you experiment with different formats. Maybe you do more branded content or branded takeovers. I think just getting creative and really leaning into those brand partnerships rather than just doing a 30-second commercial spot. I'd encourage everyone to kind of move in that direction. And I'm really hopeful that we see activity, and so surprised at how slow we've been able to adopt it in this environment. Really potential that we have in OTT. So hopefully we'll see more of that.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, there are a lot of standards of things that, from a targeting standpoint, from a data being passed, from a categorization data and other types of things that are being kind of worked out with the DSPs, with the demand side or the buyer side still. So as that kind of matures and grows it's going to open up more advertising and more targeted advertising, creating a much more relevant experience for the consumer. Yes, the frequency of ads, sometimes they repeat over and over again. I think those things will get solved soon enough as we get more standardization around the signals, the data, the controls, and so forth and so on around the ad experience around there. I'm really enthused by CTV advertising and the fact that we actually have we haven't gotten there, but we actually have an opportunity to go, get more interactive ads as we move forward, more personalized advertising. So for example, like how can, dealership groups, for example, have dynamic, inventory as part of the ad there. So those are lots of things that can be explored around that. Live streaming for e-commerce merchants as well too come to mind as areas that are ripe for innovation and ripe for opportunities for forward-thinking brands as well too.
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of touching on it, but to give an example for HBO Max, I mean, one of our ethos is that we believe that you can make impact in less time within a clutter-free experience. And one of the premium products that we launched in the onset of HBO Max was our brand block product, which allowed an advertiser to own 100% share of voice within a piece of content with the lightest commercial load that you can imagine within that time frame. And what we found was not necessarily surprising, but very encouraging, right? The consumer appetite for that was incredibly positive, but we were also able to drive higher awareness and higher recall metrics for those advertisers when you remove all of the clutter from that experience. And that consumer walks away from that content experience feeling great about the brand because they just provided utility to them within that environment, which is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, and I'll add to Derek's comment just because it's really top of mind for me right now. I spoke with the trade desk yesterday and it's 60% higher recall than traditional linear ads. That's a lot. That's significant. So that's really exciting for the potential for OTT. And I like your point of kind of these takeover experiences. I love that ad form where they say this block of time or this block of content is sponsored by so-and-so, and then you don't see any ads throughout the experience. I think people are very appreciative of that. So, and it's good brand equity.
We've seen some of the same data in our research about the effectiveness of streaming ads and connected TV ads. And one of the really interesting things is that, especially as more providers have been coming out with, like HBO Max have been coming out with tiered platforms where you can either pay and watch without ads or pay a little bit less and watch with ads. People that are watching the ad-supported versions of those platforms actually have some of the highest levels of satisfaction. And you would maybe think that would be the opposite because it's one of the situations where you're both having to pay and also having to watch ads. But the beauty of it is that no one is having to watch in a way other than the way they want to watch. So anybody who just can't tolerate ads is able to spend a little bit more and get out of seeing them. People that tolerate ads or maybe even enjoy them can save a little bit of money and have that experience, but no one is being forced to have an experience other than the one that they chose for themselves. And therefore, even if you are having to pay and see ads, you're still more satisfied.
And isn't that the exhilarating point? Like 20 years ago, nobody got that choice. You show up at a website, you take whatever we give you. And that consumer choice is so exciting.
Absolutely. And I'd like to come back if we have time at the end to discuss some specific examples of either creative or technological implementations that y'all are finding really innovative. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And we'll return to that if we have time. Obviously, so much of the effectiveness and the promise of connected TV advertising hinges around the increased capacity for targeting and personalization. John, I'd like to turn to you or start with you with this one. How are consumers feeling about being targeted in ways that they weren't before?
This is one of the most interesting things that we found. So as we talked about a little bit already, people really like that the connected TV, the ad-supported delivery experience where there's a lower ad load, where I'm able to see ads maybe that are more relevant to me, I'm more interested in them. And when we ask people about their willingness to share some information about themselves, to share some information about the shows that they watch, to share some information maybe about the things that they're doing online, in exchange for that better advertising experience, their willingness to do those things is pretty high. And there's there's higher levels of willingness about some pieces of information than others, but in general, viewers are willing to make that trade-off. And it's really interesting because that's the opposite of what you see if you ask people about sharing information about themselves, just in general, in a vacuum. People are increasingly reticent to do that. But in exchange for this better ad experience, most of them are. And the reason I think that's such a big deal is that you wind up with this very rare scenario where everybody wins. And usually with ads, people are having a less good experience for the benefit of the brands that are selling the advertising, but it's just the cost of doing business. They accept it. In this case, you have the advertisers are getting a better value because the ads are more targeted. The distributors are getting a good deal because they're able to sell valuable ad space, and the consumers are having a better experience, one that they like better than they would have if they weren't being targeted. So it really is firing on all three cylinders there, which is pretty uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is privacy by design, privacy by design, privacy by design, right? We have to be purposeful about this. When consumer identity is anonymized, we know that it yields powerful results, powerful insights. To me, I think the question is less about what consumers' perception of targeting is and more about how effective have we been at communicating what the actual value is. Like, if you go to 100 consumers and ask them if they want to see the same ad 4 times in an hour, they're all going to say no, but they don't necessarily equate privacy with frequency. And I think that's a critical thing for us to try to drive home with our consumers.
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised by your data, John. I feel like everyone's very hypersensitive, especially with the deprecation of third-party cookies on the web. You're always being asked for permission and you're always getting this choice. But I know as a consumer, I definitely appreciate more relevant ads, whether it's in a CTV environment or even on social. I like seeing things that are more relevant to me. So that's a nice change. But I do wonder, I think it's still very important to have that value exchange top of mind. To Derek's point, like our customer Forbes has done this incredibly well with live events. You're more willing to exchange your information to gain access to specific content rather than knowing what it's used for. Like sometimes I wonder if that gets lost on the consumer. They'll be like, oh yeah, I'll absolutely give you my name and email to watch Joe Jonas for free online. But I don't know if I'll necessarily do that just to get more relevant ads. So I think just having that value exchange, the way you ask, the context in which
you're 100% right. The way that we asked about it in that particular study is not really the way that people get asked about it in real life. But it's very, it's instructive that if you describe to people what they're getting in exchange for this transaction, they're willing to play ball. So it suggests that it suggests that there's a lot to be done here in innovating with the ad experience to really make it not even just a tolerable, but maybe an engaging part of the viewing experience. When you think about the live TV, think about almost anything else that's been done pretty much exactly the same way for 50 years and not really innovated on a whole lot. There's a huge opportunity, I think, to really change the way that people think about advertising and make it a win-win for both the advertisers and the consumers in how it's executed.
Well, how can we improve on targeting then? Derek, I'm going to ask you to start with this one. I mean, identity and identifiers are all over the map. Where have we seen progress and what still needs to change and get better? And how do you think that can happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it through a couple of themes, right? And a really bad analogy is essentially like you want to be invited to a party, but you don't want to find out that it was a costume party after the fact, right? So like getting invited to the party to me is the notion of a universal ID, right? We know that buyers are looking for that unified identity. They want to control frequency. They want to drive efficiency across many platforms. But the challenge is that there's not a single yardstick that's measuring the efficacy of that across all of the platforms by which buyers activate. making sure that you don't show up in a Batman costume to a black tie affair. To me, that's the power of the first party data differentiator. And how can we create interoperability with that unified ID as a media company to make sure that we can allow buyers to tap into the power of our first party intelligence about our consumers and how they behave and what their appetite is. It's one of the big focuses for us throughout the rest of this year going into next year, where we're excited to really get after making some announcements in the near future.
Yeah, Derek, I couldn't agree more of how, how valuable that first party data is. And really then also a big piece of that, right, is a persistent identifier, right? And where that goes in the future with, and as Lexie mentioned, right, third party, cookie deprecation is on its way. Excuse me. IP address churning, somewhere every, 30% every single month, are all issues, right? And that's something, we're really hyper focused on at Roku as well, with 55 million active accounts that are always deterministically logged in, right, and always persistent there. So that, and I love your point too, and I love this. I'm going to use it. Sorry, I'm going to steal it, Derek. But like, privacy equals frequency control, which is, I think, a critical component of this, and then making sure that we're using our deterministic and that first party data in a really proactive way, and making sure that we're continuing to use that to target the right way, to show not continuous same and non-relevant ads, and then how do we use then how do we link first party to then other third-party data sets, which is something we do in a big way here at Roku as well. And then, another piece that we haven't really talked about yet, but I think is really interesting in this space is ACR technology, right? And so, and we mentioned, and John, I loved your stat too about, sticks and pucks are one way to access connected TV, but then where we see giant growth in the future is the operating system of the smart TV in itself, and embedding that system into the smart TV. And right now, Roku is 1 out of 3 of all smart TV operating systems. And within that is ACR technology, which then allows us to also then extrapolate, and that's all opt-in also. And to your point, John, consumers are opting into that and don't have an issue with it. And what that does is really gives us this really, really deep understanding of what content as well as what ads consumers are watching across all of these Roku television sets, which then allows us to do all of these really great targeting tactics, whether that's, suppressing who watched, the Geico ad on linear. And so that when we show them, when we show the Geico ad on Roku, we're only showing to the audience that didn't see it on linear. And so reach incrementality is a major one. Conquesting advertising is a huge tactic that used to only exist in digital. Now we bring that to the television screen. And as well as also sequential messaging, right? You think about how advertisers can create a story arc of messaging that's really hard to make sure that audiences in linear, where you're not able to really track what kind of viewership is happening, now have the capability of doing that. So it opens up a ton of different opportunities that are both beneficial to the consumer as well as to the advertiser.
Yeah, and I think Derek and Jake, you both touched on the importance of kind of harnessing data. They put the onus of that onto our customers and our content owners. What Brightcove was hyper focused on is the contextual side of that data, and providing more information to the advertiser. For example, being a content management system, Brightcove has all this rich metadata, and we want to be able in a standardized way that we can communicate that opportunity more effectively for more effective targeting. Trying to do that through more automated systems, so through AI and ML, and that's really what we're focused on in terms of ad innovation right now.
Yeah, I concur around the contextual piece. I think a lot of buyers have not really tapped into that as much. For example, the categorizations and genre taxonomies haven't been agreed upon across the advertising industry, for example, right? So there's still a lot of work to be done around that piece there, from what I see.
All right, my next question was about reach and frequency management. I think we've covered that fairly well. And we have a number of questions from the audience, so I want to make sure that we have time to get to those. But I wanted to make sure we got to this question about ratings, and it's one that Jake suggested, and perhaps a bit of a provocative one, but why are marketers still obsessed with gross rating points when clearly we need better methods of audience measurement? So Jake, it was your question. Do you want to start?
Well, we saw it in this past upfront, right? That there is still a strong demand for linear GRPs, and I posed the question more introspective of really trying to understand how can we help marketers find other means, right, and help them really find audiences in different places. And so I think we're getting to a place where marketers are reliant we're reliant on TV GRPs because of the scale and mass reach that they provided, and they provided at efficient cost, right? Which we've known for a very long time. Digital has been more expensive. CTV at the onset was more expensive, and we're certainly finding our space now where we're coming more in line to what cable or broadcast is offering in terms of price. But really important to that other side of that equation, right, is reach and the scale of which our audiences are there for our marketing advertiser commercials. And so what we're seeing now is certainly the CTV space catching up in terms of mass reach, right? And we're seeing that as certainly ratings and total subscriptions are declining on the linear side. So there is reach declining, and we're seeing obviously with the growth and the explosion, what's been happening pre-COVID through COVID, that CTV reach is increasing exponentially, and we're almost at a tipping point where those two reach curves are crossing each other. And in some cases, looking at whether we're looking at mid-tail or long-tail cable networks, a lot of CTV operations, certainly Roku is surpassing those entities in terms of total reach. And so I think that's where things get really, really interesting. And again, going back to the ad experience, engagement within our ad pods, and what is that true ROI and benefit back to marketers. And so I think we need to continue to have the dialogue and really convince marketers that less linear TV and adding that more into the CTV space is actually going to help you continue to drive sales and possibly drive sales in an even stronger fashion.
Anyone else have thoughts on? There we go, Lexie.
I'll chime in as a marketer myself. I mean, back in business school in my media planning course on GRPs, there is safe metric. I think every marketer wants to say it's attribution. And as a B2B marketer, I have such empathy for these B2C companies who are trying to tie to attribution on such big, broad scale. When you just see a bunch of impressions, you're like, what does that mean? Am I able to tie that back to a card conversion? And I'd like to see, I think the potential is there in these environments, in these digital environments, especially as we talk about these fun and experimental things like e-commerce and the CTV environment. But I think it all comes back to attribution. I think it's a little scary to get out of your normal buying metrics when you're not able to prove that ROI.
Anyone else want to chime in? Otherwise, I've got several great audience questions here. Okay. Warren Campbell asks how, and I don't know if any of you know this, but how are ad-supported platforms doing outside of the United States? Anyone have any perspective on that?
Yeah, we're actually seeing, we're a global service. We're actually seeing a lot of growth internationally as well too. So through things like the connected TV devices or with their OS being built into the TVs themselves, a little bit less so on the sticks that we're seeing here in the United States, but we are definitely seeing people consume and look at that content through the native TV devices much more through that across different countries and everything.
Yeah, from Brightcove's perspective, actually, the majority of our customers, our ad-supported customers, are out the United States. And it makes sense when you think about it, right? Because a lot of those other markets are traditionally free to air. So they're less comfortable or less accustomed to paying for television. And I think they're getting a little bit more comfortable, and we're starting to see the emergence of subscriptions supported services. But yeah, I'd say tremendous growth and opportunity in those markets.
All right. Tyson Picken asks, have any of you been able to quantify increases in CPMs based on server-side ad insertion for free ad-supported television? I think this can be a very compelling reason for content providers to launch a FAST channel, and would welcome your thoughts.
Jake. Sorry. Our customers are always so reluctant to share. It's kind of like you get close to your heart. And I always wish we had better data on this. So I'd love like a new party like Roku to publish something on this to give us a better case.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that question and see, and figure out data that we can provide back. Off the cuff right now, I'm not comfortable, I think, talking further about that. But we can definitely do a bit more research and come back to you on that. I mean, certainly we're always looking to listen, like price sensitivity is critical, right? And we're certainly in a marketplace where marketers are really looking for better opportunities in this space, and they're comparing us to really long-term legacy partnerships that they've had with linear television groups, with some of the digital partnerships out there that are very well priced. And so striking up the right balance of value at the right price is really, really critical. We have to keep our lights on, but we're certainly also looking to manage and create more opportunity on a price basis to bring in more volume, more advertising partners, more revenue.
All right. I had a feeling we wouldn't get any actual numbers, but I had to give it a shot. Here's a really interesting question. Did someone else have something to add? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to add a note on that around compelling reasons for creating FAST channels for media owners and content owners. I think when you're looking, without quoting any numbers or anything around that part, I think that I think it's interesting to kind of note that the dynamics of what people should look at in order to build their FAST channels. One of the things that we do here at Distro TV, we have a platform services part of our company that we work with content partners to create, HLS streaming channels and so forth and so on for that. And so the dynamics of what they need to look at is not only for their content, the reach, the potential audience of who they're trying to reach. For example, if I have like a specific targeted thing around autos, for example, reaching a specific audience related in specific countries and so forth and so on. So they need to look at the overall reach, the size of their niche that they're really kind of building, and as well as weigh the kind of the sponsorship dollars that they can build off of it, as well as the CPMs as a whole for that. So the tools are all out there to be able to kind of, never before for these types of independent voices to be able to build FAST channels in a much cheaper way than they ever have been before, like in the cable space, where you're constricted by a few large companies to be able to get and launch your content out there.
I have a question that occurred to me as we were having the discussion, and it revolves around the question of, is there or has there been a stigma around ad-supported television and ad-supported OTT? And is that changing? And what made me think of it was thinking about HBO Max, just about the top tier of the premium subscription only services now offering an ad-supported tier. Are you seeing a shift in the way people are perceiving, content owners, content platforms, and service providers are perceiving advertising? Derek?
Well, yes. First of all, I think that again, to go back to one of our early points, this is all about consumer choice. And on top of providing consumers with a choice on how they want to get their content, It's also an acquisition funnel strategy, right? This allows us to provide multiple solutions at multiple price points to try to make the product as appealing as possible for as many people as possible. So, you know, there is a place for a fast solution, there's a place for an AVOD solution, there's a place for an SVOD solution, and with the right infrastructure and architecture, like, you can support all three and try to generate a much larger audience against your content.
And I think, you know, another thing that's happening that I think is going to be a really big deal is that the ad-supported platforms are now investing in their own content to make it a real destination. So if you think about when Netflix first came out, Netflix didn't have any originals. It was just a website you could go to watch the TV shows that the networks thought nobody would want to watch anymore. It was essentially the online equivalent of the blue bucket at Walmart with the $5 DVDs in it. But then they started making their own shows, and it became an entertainment company. People sought it out. And I think that as we see the free ad-supported platforms make the same kinds of investment in content, they're no longer going to be just the free place to watch shows. They're going to be a place that happens to be free, but they also have the shows I really like to see. And I think that's going to be when, you know, being free is a good reason, and that's a reason that people will watch, but it's not the most urgent reason. That, as we saw in that one graph, people seek out the content they want the most. And if they can also get that content and it's at a lower price or it's free to watch, that's a pretty tough proposition to beat.
Well, that's definitely one of the strategies that we've been employing in a big way with the Roku channel, right? And that was a big part of our acquisition of what was formerly the Quibi library of content that are now Roku originals, right? And so this past May, we launched 30 different titles that these shows are now Emmy award-winning shows, right? They're some of the most watched things on the entire Roku platform. We just launched another 20 new titles just a couple of weeks ago, and we have, you know, a lot more that are in progress, in production. Both of which are either, you know, potentially season 2s like Die Hard with Kevin Hart, which is a really funny show in case anybody's looking for something to stream. And this is all available free on TRC, right? And that's a really, to your point, John, a really valuable 1-2 punch. You get all this library content, but now there's stuff that people are starting to talk about. There's more water cooler opportunity. And then within that, you know, what we've also done is we purchased the Funny or Die content studio as well. And so they're now our Roku branded content studio. And so they're building out really great innovative ways for our advertising partners to weave within Roku originals, within other brand new things we're creating on the air, or just creating short form content as well. Everything from long form theatrical releases all the way down to, you know, 30-second spots that contextualize their brand story in a better way for the Roku audience. So it's this really fun, interesting place where data is now meeting content, art and science are blending in a big way, and bringing consumers and bringing advertisers something that wasn't there before, and making it a much more valuable proposition.
I think that's a great place to close. We're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you so much to all of you for a great conversation. We could keep going, and we'll touch on some of these issues again at a panel on Thursday about monetization strategies. So tune back in for that if this is your thing. Thanks again for joining us, to the attendees and to our panelists. We do have a winner for our Amazon gift card, and that is up on the screen, Beth Clearfield. I know I was going to mess up somebody's name, and it wasn't even a tough one. Beth Clearfield, you'll be getting an email from us relatively soon with information about that. Thanks again to Brightcove for sponsoring this session, and to Limelight Networks for sponsoring all of Streaming Media Connect. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.